Hi there, it's Fabian speaking, and it's been a while, and AEMap JSX is now in version 0.7. It's an After Effects script plugin for creating vector-based maps within After Effects. You can use them to wrap them on a sphere, like in this example, and you can also create beautiful 2D maps with it. You have the possibility of different projection types and different type of color adjustments on the layers. Because you can create compositions with about 200, 300 vector shapes, and you need some tools to get them the right color. So, maybe there are some of you who already know AEMap. So what's new in AEMap version 0.7? Well, the nice thing in AEMap 0.7, I rewrote the color tools on it, and now you have the possibility to create Choropleth maps. A Choropleth map is a map in which all the boundaries, or the states, or the countries are colored in a special way, like in this one, where each color represents some data. This is very nice because the color tools before were a bit useless unless you wanted to do random colors. So you can use hex colors to give each jurisdiction a own specific color, or you can use the HSV color scheme to define ranges based on data. So I found some population data on the internet from the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000 and 2010. And you can see what's possible by transforming this data within Spreadsheet and re-import them into After Effects to create animations. So here you can see how population rises. Awesome, isn't it? What you also can do, this is also a great new feature, you can create shapes from each type of GeoJSON your After Effects can handle. It only depends on the validity of the GeoJSON, so this has to be real GeoJSON data, but I'm going to show you some examples where you can check if your data is right. And your ability to find this data on the internet or create own GeoJSON files from shape files you can find. That's the work AEMap can't handle for you. But I'm going to show you some hints, some tricks how to create geodata for After Effects so we can use it. Awesome. Lots of red going on, great blue things in these states. Anyway, next I'm going to show you some basic settings for creating maps. Okay, the basic usage for AEMap. Just drop AEMap within your scripts panel, like I have, and restart your After Effects. And then you should be able to open it via Window AEMap. First thing AEMap does, he asks for the AEMap folder. If you don't want to clutter your scripts panel folder, don't allow AEMap to create this folder, but it's useful to create this folder because within this folder you can place GeoJSON files and they will be directly available within the user interface. Every time you create a new GeoJSON file or you add a new GeoJSON file, you have to restart AEMap. I will allow AEMap to create this folder. And here we are. You can see he created a folder called AEMap with nothing in it. I already prepared one, and within this folder I have some different GeoJSON files. So I'm just gonna drop this in here and replace it, and I have them within AEMap when I restart the script. If you don't want to have this folder, you have the possibility to select GeoJSON files from a different location, but it's more convenient to have this folder. So I close the panel, reopen it, and now I have all my new GeoJSON files within the user interface. That's pretty great, but I'm gonna skip back to use different GeoJSON files than the built-in one a little bit later. First, what are the possibilities we have on AEMap? Of course, you can just draw a quick map. It tells you how long he took and the panel will go away. This is a pretty simple map in black and white on one shape layer. When you open it up, you can see there are lots of shapes going on in here. It's about 270 or something like that. Add some styling, do whatever you want. It's pretty easy to create a globe just by adding CC sphere to it. And there you go. Very nice. You can do this with CC Sphere or Element 3D or any 3D capable plugin that can project diffusion map or something like that onto a sphere. But I think you know how to create spheres. Let's take a look at these settings. You have the possibility, when you create a new map, to make it a 3D layer. Or you can tell After Effects to use several layers, use solids with vector marks on it. You can tell him to add a timestamp to the composition name, so you have a very unique name for the comp. You can add a stroke effect, or when you use shape layers, you add the stroke property. You can add Zorro tags for Zorro the layer tagger, great script by Lloyd Alvarez. I tend to use it a lot when I'm using comps with hundreds of layers. You can tell AEMap to precompose these layers by jurisdictions. Depends a bit on the structure of the GeoJSON, it's fairly technical, but how you create your GeoJSON files with multi-polygon files or something like that. This represents within precompositions. You can reposition the anchor. This part of the script is landed. Reposition anchor by Charles Baudinat. Also great script. I just took a little part of it to get the anchor onto each shape layer or each solid. And if you add the stroke property, you have the possibility to link all these stroke properties together to have a control layer that allows you to just add some animations to all borders or something like that. Really depends on you. It's more experimental. Maybe you don't need this. Who knows? You can add, of course, a name for your composition, like my world map. Awesome. And what's also new, you can now define a specific size for your composition. So if I want a 1280 comp, it calculates the right composition size to hold the map. And also these sizes depend on which projection type you use. So for example, if I use Mercator, you can see he adjusted the size of the height of the comp to match a Mercator map. Well, it's tricky to write that. You can change the duration in seconds of the composition you create, and you can also change the frames per second you need. But there are lots of scripts out there that can also do this stuff for you. So what's very, very great is not having to work with these old scale factors I used. Now you can just write down your composition size and AEMap will calculate the right height for you. Of course, if you change the height, he will calculate the right width for you. Next feature of AEMap is the projection types. As I showed you before, there are some different types of projections for world maps. You can have a different styling or a different view on maps. So, for example, galpetas, awful projection, but it's there. Sinusoidal, that looks better. You can select these projections here within the projection pull down. Just remember, when you want to wrap it onto the sphere in Element 3D or in CC Sphere or something else, use this equirectangular projection and everything will be fine. So, geodata. If you just want to create a quick map for a sphere or something like this, you can use the built-in geodata. It's always the first entry within the pull down. But as I showed you before, you can add now your own geodata within your scripts panel into the AEMap folder or some different location when you use the other location pull down. And if you have data within this folder, on a restart of the script, AEMap will recognize them and list them within the user interface. So I created some own data. This data is part of this repository on GitHub, and it's pretty convenient now to create vector maps from what kind of jurisdiction you can find. For example, I have this US states data and I can create now a map only from US states. Isn't that great? Now you have the possibility to scale this up and use it for your maps. Great. I love this feature. Took me a long time to write this and to get this right. Okay, colors. As I told you before, I rewrote the color tools for AEMap because the old color tools were kind of useless if you wanted to colorize specific boundaries or specific jurisdictions with a specific color. You only had the possibility to do random colors on random shapes or solids, and this was a major problem. Now we can define specific colors for each jurisdiction or each feature you got in your GeoJSON file. As you can see, the color settings, well, let me open up all settings so we got all this together. The color settings got a lot smaller, look better than before. We also have a color picker built right in, so you can use the system color picker to set a color, for example, the fill, and use the system color picker to set a color for the stroke. And if you do a single layer map, you can define these colors before drawing them in After Effects. I just add the stroke property to my map and let After Effects draw a new map. And here we go. We got a ready-made map. Of course, you can also always change these colors before and after creating a new map. So this is not such an important feature, but we can now define colors for each jurisdiction or each feature, like it's called in GeoJSON, within our dataset. To do this, you just select the dataset you want to use. I will use the built-in for now, and you select the Choropleth Map checkbox. Also, for convenience, check the OpenCSV folder checkbox and tell AEMap to dump the table into a new folder. I have this folder here set up already. He dumps it and opens the folder for me in the Finder. So he creates a CSV with the name of the selected GeoJSON file. So if I would, for example, select this USA State Counties GeoJSON, he would name it US State Counties GeoJSON CSV. I open this up in an application that allows me to edit spreadsheets. I use LibreOffice. You can also use OpenOffice or Excel, whatever you like. You can also edit it in a simple text editor, but to use something like OpenOffice, it's easier to edit spreadsheets. Make sure that you use the right character set. Normally it should be UTF-8. And important is that you recognize the CSV delimiter as the comma that AEMap uses. You can see if I use tabs, it doesn't work, or semicolons also don't work. You need to use the comma separator, and then he creates already fine separated rows and columns for us. Hit OK, and then he opens up our spreadsheet. You can see he exported some information for you. He exported the index. This is important if you, for example, have to rearrange the spreadsheet to add some colors. Maybe you want to sort them by some different data you got in there. Make sure you always at the end reorder it by the index, because AEMap needs this index to match it to your GeoJSON file. Here we got this feature row. Just leave it as it is. Rows like ID and name get automatically exported. In the GeoJSON file that's built in, there is this ID and there is the name. If you have different properties, all these properties should be exported to your spreadsheet. And now for the interesting color part. We have for the fill 4 rows and for the stroke 4 rows. You can add other rows to make some calculations if you need. At first I will show you how to use hex colors. So I open up this color picker to get some hex colors, and if I want to select a color, I maybe just choose a nice one over here. I found this plugin for the system color picker that gives me hex colors. Just paste it into the fill color. Then maybe I select another color, paste this one as well into the fill color, and I select a third one, get the hex value, paste it in here, and here let's do 4 colors. Take this one, paste it in here. I'm just a lazy guy, so I will fill this spreadsheet up randomly. It's not important to have the right colors here now. And I just use a black stroke for now. Also copy this, paste this in here, and save my file. It's important that you use the CSV format because everything else won't work. Also, make sure you don't add any extra columns except the ones AEMap created. So I got this saved. I close my spreadsheet, go back to After Effects, and now I select the hex radio checkbox, read in this spreadsheet again. Depending on how much columns you have in here, it can take a lot of time or less time. And now I tell AEMap to not do a single layer map. I tell him to do a multi-layer map. I right now don't need the Zorro tags. I don't need to reposition the anchors, and I don't want to link the stroke properties. And now let's see what happens. Isn't this great? We have the right colors for each jurisdiction or feature we defined. Now to the HSV model. I reopen my spreadsheet. Once again, it is important to use the comma as separator. And we take a look at the HSV settings. We got the U the fill for the saturation and the brightness for the saturation, and we got the hue, the saturation and the brightness for the stroke. They are already filled in, and to better get a grasp of the HSV model, the hue is the position of this crosshair in a degree value around the circle. The saturation is the position of this crosshair within this circle, and the brightness is the position of the slider. Unfortunately, this color picker doesn't give you a real value you can use. So to have an overview how these values behave, I created a little processing application. You can find it here under this URL that lets you edit these values and get the real numbers. You see here's a little slider that goes around the circle. It starts at red and ends at red, and also we have the saturation and the brightness. I also wrote this for P5.js if you're more the online tool kind of guy, to get some values. Clone these repositories, use them as you like. I will just do some basic changes in here. We don't need a real definition right now. I changed the hue for all these, for each row, and maybe we add in some saturations for these, do them at 10%, 50%, and let's set the brightness also to 50%. As I told you, make sure you don't add any extra rows. I won't change the stroke settings right now, just save this, use the CSV format and close it again. So I read in the table once again, make sure I have the HSV selected, and draw another map. And once again, great. We have now a map colored with HSV colors. Why put in HSV and the hex values? Well, when you need specific colors defined by your client or somebody else, or by yourself, you need to use the hex values. The color conversion I use within my script, it's a bit different than the color conversion used in After Effects to calculate HSV colors. But the great thing about HSV is that it's value dependent. So I showed you before this population map, and I did some calculations within the spreadsheet to calculate from population values HSV values, and this enabled me to define ranges of colors based on populations. So for example, for creating this animation and this data, this color data, I have here several maps, one for 1960, one for 1970, one for 1980, and I calculated this data within this spreadsheet. I found some population data online. For the brightness, as you can see in here, there's a pretty complex if statement. I can show you this a bit better like this. It says if the value in cell M2 is less than 100,000, add in a 0. So we got here a 0, and because this value is a 0. If the value is less than 200,000, add in a 20. If it's less than 400,000, add in a 40, and so on. And this is the last statement. If it's greater than 1 million, set it to 100. You can do very complex calculations within spreadsheets, but I'm not going to show you how to do this. There are lots of tutorials on the internet who just write about this topic. You still have to use CSV to export this. So you should save a copy as a CSV file and tell him to use a UTF-8 character set, the comma as delimiter, and important is that you save the cell contents as shown. And now I save this, and as shown before, then just read in the table again and you get your map colored like you want it. Geodata. To make sure that your GeoJSON is valid, you can use tools like linters. Sublime Text has some great plugins for linters. Something is wrong. You can see if I now save this with installed linter, he says there's a delimiter missing. So this is a great way to check if your GeoJSON is valid. And I could place this next to the AEMap script in the AEMap folder and load this with AEMap. If you want to check the validity of your data online, there's this tool called GeoJSON.io, and this allows you to just drag and drop a GeoJSON file onto this map. This can create problems if your file is too huge. This will crash the application. But if it's not valid, he will throw an error. And you can already have it on a map, do a little checkup how your data will behave then within after. This uses a mercator projection. If you use different projections within AEMap, it could look a bit different. That's a great way to check your data. Also, you can create your own data with some command line tools you can find online. If you look for shapefiles on the internet, you will come to websites like these and you can download these shapefiles. This one is very huge, so be aware that this can crash your After Effects if you're loading too huge JSON file. But when you have this shapefile, there's a great tutorial on how to convert shapefiles to GeoJSON on a Mac, and also the Windows users are covered with these tutorials. These tools are free to use. You will need to dig into this deeper, but I managed to create, for example, this TM World Borders, and you will see this will take some time to load. Took me about 30 seconds to load this, so this is a very huge file. And you can now create maps from this data set, which is has more accurate borders than the built-in data. Or on the World GeoJSON created by Johan at GitHub, there are also some US states, some US counties. So if you load this into your After Effects in the AEMap folder next to the script, you will be able to create maps only from state counties. That's about it. If you run into any errors, do a post on the aescripts forum for AEMap. Contact me via one of the social networks. If you need different geodata, go to this GitHub repository by Johan, and for example, here are all the countries separated. Here is some data for the United States. These are all the counties, I think. It's a great resource. Take a look around the internet for different GeoJSON files. Make sure this is real valid GeoJSON. AEMap relies on this plugin created by Rich Harris, Baby Parse. Great parser for CSV to JSON. Thanks a lot. And also it relies on the great JSON parsing tools by Douglas Crockford. Thank you. I also want to thank you for all the donations and feedback you gave me over the last 2 years. You're helping to make my living with these donations. And AEMap will stay open source and also always stay under the name your own price policy at aescripts. And thanks for watching.